This podcast discusses themes of mental health, which some people may find emotive, such as suicide or other adult-themed content. The information contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. All views expressed are solely those of individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which we have been, are now, or will be affiliated. The information is not meant to diagnose or treat any mental health condition. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, we encourage you to contact a mental health service within your community. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek the relevant support and interventions by presenting to your local accident and emergency department or contacting the relevant emergency services.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper. I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Hello, Happy New Year and welcome to this month's Man Hug. This month we have two more fantastic guests and we'll be talking around the theme of tragedy. Tragedy is defined as an event that causes great suffering, destruction and distress, such as serious incidents, accidents, crime or natural catastrophe. We have on past episodes spoken with guests about things we can often prepare ourselves for, such as death and dying. But what happens to us when a serious incident comes out of the blue? Well, our first guest, who we are really thrilled to have, is Sheila Coleman, who many of you may know through her work with the Hillsborough Justice Campaign. Sheila, welcome to the Man Hug.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
Oh, thanks, Sheila. For any of our listeners who don't know you, please just give us a little bit about yourself and your own life.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the north end of Liverpool in Kirkdale, and I was a Liverpool fan for as long as I could remember, and came from a family of blues. My cousin even captained Everton in the 70s. So I was always seen as a strange child. But I like to think I saw the future and it was red. Because when I was a kid, Everton were the better team than Liverpool, but I did see the future. So my friend and I, from the age of 7, would walk up and go in the boys' pen. And we were quite quiet kids, you know. And the idea of letting 7-year-olds off to the match, but you know, we held our ground because it was mainly boys in there. And then by the time we were 11, we'd progressed to the Cop. So we had all that, you know, we just adored Liverpool. In later years, I've done many jobs, but I worked as a lecturer. And I was working as a lecturer in I think City College in Liverpool when the Hillsborough disaster occurred. I wasn't at Hillsborough, but I knew lots of people who were. And I can remember, I think it was Radio Merseyside, reading out names of the dead and listening for names of my friends and being pleased when their names weren't there, but then feeling terribly guilty because they were someone's son, someone's, you know, father, husband, whatever. And so at that time, there was quite the remnants of a bit of a radical council, an independent group in Liverpool, and I had friends amongst them, and they immediately set up the Hillsborough Disaster Working Party, and that's often forgotten in the annals of recording the history of Hillsborough, but they were just amazing because a few of them had been there for knowing what had gone on and challenging what was becoming already the official version of events. So in the course of a few months, I then went to work at Edge Hill University on the Hillsborough project, which had been formed. And my role was to monitor the legal proceedings that arose out of Hillsborough. So I spent a lot of time, particularly around the inquests, up in Sheffield. And what you could see was you were talking to people who'd been there, and then you were talking to professionals, and they just didn't match up at all. In fact, you were being lied to as they had been lied to. And what happened in some instances was we'd ask, could we record? And I remember speaking to the heads of the South Yorkshire Ambulance Service and speaking, and he gave us, chapter and verse, what he did, what his role was, etc. And then when we stopped taping, then the truth came out. Same thing happened with the manager of a hospital. So they weren't prepared to go on record, but it was cathartic. They almost wanted to confess to someone what they hadn't done. So just to give one example, one guy we spoke to, one of the Sheffield hospitals, said, I put it to him that him or another manager had come into the canteen area where people were waiting for news of, because they didn't know whether the loved ones were dead or not. And he stood on the table reading the names of the dead out. And he went, oh, no, not at all, that didn't happen. And then when the recording was finished, he quietly told me that was him that did that, and he felt very guilty for doing that. So on a human level, you have sympathy for people who experience that, because everyone who was there suffered. I think what the real tragedy comes when people won't own up, and it's the power imbalance. There's a real power imbalance. So when Hillsborough happened, I got to know lots of the families, amongst them bereaved families who also were survivors as well, brothers who survived, etc. But also as well, I got to know survivors, and there was nowhere for survivors to go, in the sense of no one really bothered about them too much. There was a social worker centre in Stanley Park, and that was a survivors centre, but it was very much social workers, set times, and it wasn't the format I think that much of us would agree with now in terms of helping people. And in the early days, I think the sad thing is that those people who survived just saw themselves as lucky to be alive and guilty for being alive. So that survivor's guilt, they wouldn't have framed it like that, they wouldn't have said that, but that figured a lot in it, and would manifest itself in various ways. But the emphasis was solely on bereaved families and the victims. And that's not a criticism, it's an observation. And so survivors did feel that they had such valuable things to say because they were eyewitnesses. And they said that, well, when it gets to the inquest, I'll say this, I'll say that. And then, of course, you saw the total manipulation and control of the inquests, how they phased them so that they had these so-called mini-inquests, which weren't known at the time, where they were just going to have limited information released. And it just so happens that the limited information they would release, and then to be adjourned until the DPP had decided on any prosecutions. But it just so happened that the information they would release at these inquests, at these mini-inquests, would be who the person was, the position they were in, where they died and when, and their blood alcohol level. So, right, you see the agenda setting of blood alcohol level. Even, because we know now that, they took blood alcohol levels in children. And then in older people, where they took blood alcohol levels and it was 0, the police then accessed the national database to see if they had any criminal convictions. So the whole thing was that element of drunkenness, that became, the prevailing context for which it was all discussed. And I have to say that the other thing was the appalling representation that the families had. Bear in mind, there was no legal aid for inquests. The only way families could pay was the public fund that everyone put into. People got money from that, and that people used that to pay barristers. And the barristers weren't always in court. It was very often, it was the solicitor. And I remember one day him saying, him actually using the phrase, so he had such and such, so he'd have been too drunk to drive, wouldn't he? So he was buying into it himself. It was all really horrible how it played out, because it just made alcohol. And the families would go, well, you know, well, my so-and-so hadn't had a drink, and well, he'd only had this, he'd only had that. Well, it shouldn't have been a matter. You know, if you go, they don't breathalyse people going into the Philharmonic Hall to see a concert. But it was that whole context in which football was viewed in the 80s through the lens of hooliganism. And also, as well, how Liverpool was viewed at that time as a kind of, militant city. I wish it was, but that is how it was viewed. So all those negative connotations were there. But what I saw with survivors I got friendly with was how their main thing was they wanted to help others. They wanted to help the parents. They wanted to help the bereaved families and tell the truth. And all that was available at the time was the Hillsborough Family Support Group, and that wouldn't allow survivors to be involved. So the Hillsborough Justice Campaign grew out of some Hillsborough families in the family support group, their dissatisfaction with not being listened to, and the fact that survivors weren't being included in anything. And I hold my hands up. I argued against the forming of the Hillsborough Justice Campaign to begin with, because I said, no, you stay and fight. The establishment love it if you cut off, divide and rule, the own tactic. But then it did get to the point where they just couldn't continue in that group when some of the committee went to discuss with the editors of The Sun, forgiving The Sun, and there was going to be a payout, and people I worked with was going, no way. And then I thought, nah, they're right, there needs to be another arm. That includes survivors. So the proud boast of the Hillsborough Justice Campaign is that it was very much a grassroots organisation that listened to those at the cutting edge. It responded to those who were there. So it was made up of bereaved families and survivors, and then people like me who were involved on another level. And it was 9 years after the disaster. I'm going, whoa, starting a campaign 9 years after, whatever. And it grew to a ridiculous, seriously, it grew beyond anything we could ever imagine. And the support we had was amazing. It was just incredible. And over the years, that just grew. But we would respond. People would come in and go, you know, we want to up the Sun boycott. And we go, okay. And that was never my main emphasis. My main emphasis was, you know, the legal stuff, but as well see the importance of it. And we go, okay, what do you want? Well, we want stickers. And I was, okay, we'll get them. So I remember around one anniversary, we kind of made it boycott the Sunday. And the night before, I was out with the lad who was, I think Gary was secretary, was the Hillsborough survivor, secretary at the time, or treasurer. And we had to book as a pace and that. And my son got me these, you know, the posters you do for clubs, those ones. And we just like posted, and you know, so it was very hands-on, all around Anfield, in town, everywhere where anyone would see it. And so those were the things we were prepared to do. And I have to say, to begin with, people going into the ground who had our stickers on were told to get them off or they would be asked to leave. Liverpool Football Club didn't like us at all. We put out a plea to all the clubs in the Premiership, asking could we have a signed ball so we could auction them, sell, raise some funds. And we got a ball off everyone except Liverpool Football Club. Yeah. Eventually we got one through the back door, which you have to say come through Jamie Carragher's dad, who was sound. Philly was brilliant. He'd come in and say what you need, but it was always kind of never direct. We had very poor support from Liverpool Football Club. It makes you feel ashamed, actually. And so, yeah, we just continued along that way. But in terms of seeing tragedy and seeing, like, to pull it back to, you know, sort of men's mental health, you would see that people were traumatised, but they didn't recognise it. And there's
in particular with that, Sheila, you know, you got to know so many families and
Yeah.
help people. Did you notice a difference with the way that men were dealing it compared to women, for example?
Yeah, men were more proactive in many ways, interestingly enough. Not in all cases, but sometimes I'd ring the family and the woman would say, oh, I'll get John for you, or I'll get so-and-so for you. And I think the energy went into that rather than on an emotional level. Yeah. But, and I kind of have there's one family, and I know, I mean, they're like my family. I just adore them. Who have had more than their fair share of tragedy. And they lost their son at Hillsborough, and 2 brothers were there. One was with the brother who died. Well, I'll name him because I know they're fine with that. Ian. It was the Glover family, who were just amazing. Ian died at Hillsborough. Joe was in the pen with him, and John, their other brother, was somewhere else in the ground. And Joe got out, and he tried to get back in to get Ian, and they wouldn't let him in. Understandable. And he kept talking to Ian till Ian, and anyway, Ian died. Joe wouldn't express much, but then more I got to know him, Joe would disappear. Joe used to show you a video, and he'd watch this video and he'd go, keep watching, and it was the pen. And he'd stop it and he'd freeze it, and it was at the last moment him and Ian were ever together in the pen, and he'd just freeze it at that moment. But equally, Joe would disappear, and his family would find him lying on the grave of his brother in the middle of the night in the cemetery. And the Justice Campaign, and John and Teresa always acknowledge this, supported Joe. I think he felt safe with us, and he was coming round great. I mean, the Saturday night I'd been, it was when we had the boycott Hillsborough, when we wouldn't go to Sheffield because of the way Sheffield's were treating fans and stuff. And we had the big thing at St George's Hall, and I was with Joe at that day, and I had a great conversation with him. He was going, "This is what it's about, Sheila, isn't it? We're still fighting, whatever." And a day or two later, he got, which was his first job since Hillsborough, and he was in a wagon, and they were delivering marble slabs, and they weren't secured properly, and the van went round the corner, and a marble slab fell on him and killed him and crushed him. I mean, it's Greek tragedy, crushing him 10 years after the disaster, which, for the family, it's just, horrendous. But they kept fighting. And John, their dad, was just, I always say he was my mentor. He was like just this amazing man who went, write us this letter, Sheila. And I'd go, well, all right, John, well, why don't you write it? No, you know what to say. So I'd start writing a letter, and I'd go, "Dear so-and-so," whoever it was I was writing to, the police or anything, and I'd say something, and he'd go, no, not that, blah, blah, and he'd say it, and I'd write it, and I'd go, "Oh, no, I might change 1 or 2 words," and at the back I'd go, "Yeah," and he'd go, "See, that's why I get you to write those letters, you're brilliant." It was all himself.
Yeah.
It was all himself. And he'd ring me up of a night. Remember we got a ruling, I think it was on pre-death suffering, and it was House of Lords decision, and I hadn't read it. I'd flick through and went, "I'll read it when I get time." Rings me up. "Have you read that yet?" No, John. "Well, that Lord Keith of Kinkle," and I always remember Lord Keith of Kinkle for some reason, because it just cracked me up. Here's this man sitting up in Walton, reading these House of Lords ruling on Lord Keith of Kinkle, what he said and stuff. And I've got such happy memories of that family and being with them, being inclusive with them. And they really suffered. But Joe was someone who clearly was suffering from post-traumatic stress. In the early days of it all, I remember the solicitors brought in a guy who had been who diagnosed Falkland veterans, and he was a naval man. I won't say his name, but I remember his name. And he, everyone, loads of people went, but it wasn't so much survivors, it was mainly families. And, basically he put a title on what they had, post-traumatic stress, gave them prescriptions, and they felt better for a while, But that whole thing of people fighting back, I think is difficult. What the survivors we met in the social workers centre in Stanley Park, there was a group, and they got on better with some of the social workers than others, but And I used to drift in and out of there, go and see them, whatever. But a lot of information was kept from them, which I felt was wrong. And I remember going one day, the radical group of them used to meet on a Tuesday afternoon. I always remember this. And I turned up this Tuesday, and one of the social workers says, "Oh, hi, do you want a cup of tea, whatever?" I says, "Oh, no, I've come to the group." He thought I'd come to see them. I said, "Oh, no, I've come to see, the Tuesday group." And he went, "So good luck going into the lion's den." Now, that was because they actually said what they wanted. It was more, it was what they wanted, what they felt was important for them. And, I can think of those people who were part of that, and some of them are still very prominent now. So it was cathartic, and it was very useful that they could voice their thing together. But in the main, that's such a small group. You're talking thousands of people. And over the years, the suicides from people who didn't get help, the people who died prematurely through ill health, through not looking after their physical health, but then the people who've taken their own lives, and that's just heartbreaking. I mean, in the Hillsborough shop, the guy who ran it on a daily basis for us, voluntary, Jerry McIver, was an incredible man. He used to be a transport manager, but he was retired, and he lived quite close, and he'd go into that shop every day, open up if anyone wanted to come in. But more than that, he gave people the most valuable thing. He gave them time. And I reckon he saved more times, more lives by giving people time. In some ways very practical, where he's actually not just talking to people, where he's broken into people's flights and saved them literally. But that thing, he was a constant, so someone would know. And I find it quite heartbreaking, the people who slip through the net.
I was mentioning before, we had a chat before the podcast, I was saying about friends and family of mine who had either lost people or were survivors themselves, and I as growing up around them, I've seen either they would use anger as a way of dealing with it, so they'd either use drugs or alcohol, and it would come out in frustration and anger, and especially when there were certain court cases going on at the time, again you'd see those sudden waves of anger again, obviously. But I was saying as well about one person who's close to our family who sadly lost his brothers, and the only time I'd ever feel, and not just me, other people were able to feel that we could talk about with him would be at the memorial in Anfield once a year. That was like his, it was like his one outlet a year to grieve and talk about it. And now, as someone who's worked in mental health for so many years, I look back and I think, that's so poor, really, that there was nothing for him and his family around his area, and the only way he felt he could deal with grieving publicly was at something like that, which they don't have the memorial anymore.
Well, we have it.
Obviously, yeah.
And that was very much because something came up on a Facebook memory the other day where a survivor, and it was brilliant, and he went, we're not getting told what to do. And, I say as kind of just like, as the way we do it, we're there. Even if nobody talks, nobody says anything, people are just drawn naturally to the monument over by the tunnel. They know. But the people who linger, and it always worries me that some people linger and you don't get a chance to talk to them. And it got that way that, and it's really interesting that you say that. On the day of the, I stopped going to the memorial at Anfield years ago because I felt it was being used as a controlling mechanism. It was being used as to tell people they must sit at grounds, etc. And bereaved families were doing the dirty work of politicians, So we'd when the shop was there, and that we'd have a walk round to the memorial at Anfield, and we'd have it before, so it didn't conflict with anyone wanting to go in the ground. And then I'd go back to our shop, and Jerry and I'd be there and a couple of others. And over years, a lot of the lads wouldn't go in the ground, and they'd just come and sit with us. We'd also get other people who would be so upset. Or you'd get people who, this is the first time I've been, and you'd pull them to one side, or and if I felt I wasn't getting anywhere, I'd go, do us a favour, just wait a minute. And I'd go and get someone who was also very quiet, our chair actually was also very quiet, but who was there, and is probably one of the best people to speak to. So I kind of knew my limitations because I'm not a survivor, and and I'd never impose anything, but I'll always be there for, sort of practical things. And you would see people after, and they would tell you that they'd never spoken about Hillsborough since that day. They're married, the wife doesn't know they were at Hillsborough, they've got children. And for whatever reason, that year, they've come from down south and they need to talk. And that still goes on. I received a communication the other week from someone who I helped years ago. And I won't go into details of it, but I took him on trust, and I was right to take him on trust. It wasn't Liverpool. And we were able to help him. And he gave me permission I lined him up with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, with the guy's permission, that that she would try and help him, but she could only help him to the point where she felt he didn't want to commit suicide, but she never thought he'd have any quality of life. So I went, no, do it. And then when it got to the end, she said, look, he has improved. In fact, he's improved more than I thought. I'd just keep going with him. And that guy's since married, he's got his own house, he's married, he's very creative in what he does in work, and his quality of life, it's a real success story. And he contacted me before Christmas, and he contacts me intermittently, and he said, I'm going to meet the person I was with on the day, who I've never spoken to since that day. And he messaged me afterwards and he went, the guy's in a really bad way, can you help him?
God.
So, informally those things still happen.
Yeah.
But, look, how many years are you talking? And how many, and I've known someone who had the best treatment money could buy and who ended up taking their own life,
And I suppose it goes back to yourself and the other people who've been so instrumental in helping others, how you actually got through it yourself and how you looked after yourself. Because I just want to give you this quote that I was following the ITV drama, and I remember reading an interview with Kevin Sampson, and he'd basically said how Anne Williams' daughter said that the two of you together were basically like Cagney and Lacey, which I always loved that quote, because you just wanted to find out every single detail, and that you gave her mum such a voice at the time. So with all of that as well, that sort of, pressure on yourself and through what must have been extremely stressful times for you as well, how did you sort of deal with it in that process? Did you talk with other people? Or?
No, it was really, really, it's only on reflection now, and I have paid a price, but that is many years down the line. I was a single parent with a young son. I was part of a project for a time, and I made a vow after that if ever I was part of a research project doing critical research again, I would make sure in terms of any funding applications, that was what was built into it was counselling and debriefing for the researchers, because what I was exposed to was absolutely appalling. And I'll give you just one example. Myself and another person on the project at the time were going to meet people in Sheffield Medico-Legal Centre, which was where it houses the pathologists, the mortuary, and it's a conglomerate of different things. So speaking to the person in there, and he'd been there on the day. Well, first of all, we got there, and the person I was with nearly fainted with the smell, so she was rubbish. So she had to wait outside, and I was like, yeah. So then, so I did. He said, "I'll show you around." I went, "Yeah, sure." And on reflection, the guy was playing with me. He went. He said, "No, this is the coroner's office. This is the fridge. These are the fridges where we put the bodies." And he opened it, and there was a body in it. Then, and this is where the technicians, the morticians work. And he took me in, and I went in first. And he says, "Oh, they must have gone for the lunch." And what I saw was a body halfway through an autopsy, with its outside in, with its insides out. And I thought, this guy's playing with me, but, you know, he's not going to win. So I carried on. But then after that, I had, I used to have terrible dreams where I had a shopping trolley and I had dead bodies in the shopping trolley, and I'd be wheeling them round and looking for someone's son. And I had no way to offload that. And I was seeing social workers who, they do so many days, and then they were off and they had debriefing, etc. I just carried on. And then I left the project I was on because, well, first of all, the person wanted to end the project. He would deny that now, but he said he wasn't going to ask for any more funding. And I said, but we're just getting to the critical point. And he went, no, you just need to come sit behind a desk and write, you know, forget all that. And I went, I can't forget it. We've made friends with these people. They've given us their stories. Now it's our time to give back in terms of how we continue to help them if we can, etc. So on a point of principle, I left the project. I continued to cooperate in terms of writing something, but I just was more direct. You don't walk out on people, and that's my own ethics, and, you know, hence why, you know, I don't have like, I'm not a professor or whatever, you know. You know, I over the years I saw many people drift in and out to their own advantage, and it didn't, what it needed was constant. I mean, so I moved from there to work at Hope University, where I continued the research, but then it reached a point where I thought, this is going to have to, you know, I can't give to that and give to that totally. So anyone sensible would have said, I can't do as much on this. I'm going to have to do my job, because I was, you know, financially insecure. But, you know, not me. I gave up my job and worked unpaid and voluntary for years, you know, on the Hillsborough campaign, because it warranted that. Like, you know, you mentioned Anne before. We would go up to Sheffield on the promise of one piece of paper off South Yorkshire Police. But it was those one pieces of paper that grafted. And to be honest, you know, and I know Sarah's, you know, what she said about Cagney and Lacey. If you didn't laugh through those experiences, you just couldn't carry on at that level, that intense level of misery. And so when I'm with people, sometimes we have some great laughs, recalling things. And we had nicknames when we went to the inquest. We had nicknames for everyone. We had nicknames for the coroner. And John Glover especially was just brilliant with the nicknames. And it becomes, you know, you do become like, because you're all pushing in the same direction. And then sadly over time what happens is, and this is what really hurts a lot of survivors, is people are seduced. They're seduced by... they're either seduced by money or they're seduced by B-list celebrities and politicians. People, and it's sad that people can be seduced by someone putting their arms around them. That in itself says something, I think. For me, when I've always been suspicious, we operated outside of everything. So we didn't have... we got support from people. We never got support from politicians. You know, people can say what they want now, but we know the difference. And some of the people who are lauded now, I could tell you tales when they wouldn't meet with us, you know, or they've run away. I could name 2 people who ran away from me in the House of Commons.
With that as well, and I suppose, you know, that constant fight for justice, how much of that kind of, you know, take its toll on everyone as well? You know, was it the longest one in UK history, the case as well, you know? To have to go through that for such a long period as well.
So what you're saying is every time I used to go, I've got to back off. It's like, it really is impact. Because I had terrible things happen to me as well. My home being broken into, etc. And the only thing going was your address book and your checkbook. And, you know, we're talking like the early 90s, and, you know, when the currency was, you know, your telly and your video machine, nothing taken. And they were the times when you go, right, am I going to give in to this? Which no one could criticise if you did. But once you didn't, then you get a reputation for being dangerous because of your honesty and integrity. And also people have tried to buy me off over the years on numerous different levels. And once you say no, And once you say, no, I'm not going to do that, and someone asks you, will you write this letter, we'll do that. I'm talking about people in power now. And you go, no. And then you go, oh, watch her, you can't trust her. She won't play the game. So you become dangerous because you won't play the game. Also because people are never sure what you're going to say if they give you a platform. You'll get away with it once. So I learned that was one of the things, and if I was teaching people, I always used to say it. If someone wants to interview you, ask them, is it live or recorded? And they go, why not? Say, well, if it's live, go for it. Name names, you'll get it out once. If it's recorded, keep doing sound bites so they'll get a bit of it in. And they were all tactics. They were all things like that I'd try to teach Anne. Because Anne was an innocent. Anne wasn't political. She was too trusting of people, and she had many people take advantage of her as well. But she had a tenacity. But look at that. Anne could still be alive today, and those things really hurt me. I can go down a list, and so most of our people, of our families, are dead. And that is so awful. But in terms of the impact it has on you, you don't even realise the impact it has on you, that you become a much angrier person, you become cynical, and you don't even realise it. And it's, and I think, I've always seen myself as quite a weak person, to be honest with you, and and believe it or not, I was a very shy child. And I say things sometimes, and my son will go, Mother, they're probably scared of you. And I go, why would they be frightened of me? And he goes, you just don't get it, do you? And I go, no. And he goes, but you say things, and I go, well, I can't help it. That's just, and it's only if I believe in something. I'm rubbish. I couldn't sell you anything unless I really felt it, But what people get is an honesty. And I felt that Hillsborough people had been lied to too much. And there was no way I was going to condone lies. And that's the thing, even when we moved on, when you move on, like after the HIP report, etc., and we get legal proceedings in place, when the lawyers get involved, it becomes a process of negotiation rather than a process of truth. And you'll get a measure of truth because it's bartered. Things are bartered in and out. And I found that really frustrating. Some of the families did as well, when they really wanted something mentioned about what was said to someone, but it had been bartered out in a process of negotiation. And I understand the tactics of that, and that can reap rewards. But there's no absolute truth when lawyers are involved. And I still find that a little bit difficult to deal with.
Just asking, because I've got family members who are have been embroiled in inquiries back over in Northern Ireland, and this is the other side of the other guilt of it is the fact that they've been brought into this, they've had so much information they can actually give, and then they go, I can't do this now, and they actually go, no, I'm leaving it. So then there's the other side of it, it's just the fact that, they survived what actually may have actually happened. But then it's also the case, I'm not strong enough to actually give this information across as well. And, I'm sure you probably had similar things that people ran away, just thinking, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. This is my coping mechanism.
I wouldn't criticise anyone. And I think I always say, and to be honest with you, in the darkest days, and someone would go, but because we had no legal proceedings and everything, but we've been going at this for so many years, and you could see people weary. We met every Monday for years. And it was like we heard the same stories over and over again. It was cathartic, whatever. And I used to say, oh, come on, you've only been going for so many years. Look at the bloody Sunday families, and it mattered. And, I have, very close friends who are around, call it the Troubles, I won't particularly call it that, but anyway, who lost people, whether at Bloody Sunday or, being killed whilst the British were active in the north of Ireland. And they weren't recognised as having trauma to begin with. But what I see is, and I think, and again, if you look at the number of male suicides in Derry, for example, it's huge. The number of bodies that get pulled out the River Foyle. You can't escape, I don't believe. When you're used to, or soldiers at your door, or, having to duck down, whatever, or being direct conflict, people are frightened and people will run away. But even those who confront it, and if they survive, they're traumatised. And, I have friends who still fight for what they see as justice and will not. And that causes divisions because, so-called reconciliation. And, I'm not digressing, but if you want to talk about, Sinn Féin and reconciliation going down the road of parliamentary things, my friends go, no, we're not going to buy into that. And we're not going to buy in to soldiers who died, their names being next to my brother's in that museum when my brother was murdered. So, all those things are trauma. But what I also see is tremendous spirit, and how those people's minds are open to so many just people, right, internationally. And I know that even this year, the commemoration for Bloody Sunday this year, the main focus on it is Palestine. The main speaker is Huda Amori, who's just part of Palestinian Action, who's just was found not guilty last week. So those links, I think, lend to a broad mind thing. But people are traumatised, and you see it when you're speaking to them as well.
But the sad thing about it is, once again, it's history just keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
So the one we've got recently, it's just the postmasters, just with computers, IT and things like that, and look at, people who've got ill, strokes, suicide, being in prison, all this kind of stuff, whatever. And it's just this repetition. And once again, it's the same, we're hiding the truth and things like that.
What I find really scary is that that we are reliant on television programmes to bring about a measure of justice.
Yeah.
And also, as well, it has just so fallen into the government's hands. The government will act really quickly now, as it's saying, people will be compensated, etc. I still waiting to see how they can do that legally, because I would think you'd have to go through that legal process of, quashing verdicts and stuff. But for those people, you're talking 20 odd years, people think it was like yesterday, and all those that have lost their lives, where it's fallen into the government's hands, the government's going to be seen, Labour must hate them at the moment because they're doing all the things Labour would have promised if you voted them in. So they've caught onto it. But I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set. Drama documentaries can be brilliant. Yeah. But that says the legal process in this country isn't working when you rely on those things. And then also, sadly as well, you then make pseudo-celebrities out of the people involved. This morning on television, they were calling for Mr. Bates, who, brilliant party player, was to be knighted. Well, you know what? And it's like whilst the new inquests were on, two people from the Hillsborough Family Support Group, whilst we'd adjourned over the Christmas holiday, took honours off the Queen. So there, you're fighting the establishment there and taking honours off them there. I just don't get it. I really, really don't. So I think that the drama documentaries and the work that goes into them, brilliant. But I think it's what's wrong with our country when we're dependent on that. And the years that pass in between.
Yeah, exactly.
That people's... that the whole, because historically, the postmaster or postmistress was always like a really respectable job. In Ireland, the kind of people go in there and you're in a queue, you're there for an hour while they're having a conversation, and, you daren't say, hey, I want to be served here, it might be the only person they see all week. Yeah. And I know that's gone now, but they were the respectable. Yeah. And for them to have that criminalised. But one thing, it's coming back to something you said, and it is relevant about, survivors who turn to drink or drugs, whatever. I used to see a guy on the street, and really rough, clearly into gear, whatever, but only rough. And I was always a bit wary of him, to be honest, because I knew he had an anger in him as well as he wasn't just zonked. And then someone found some video footage on the day. And I can't think who I was looking at it with, but I'm looking at it in our shop. And I see this dead, fresh-faced lad, and he actually pushes his way to the camera. They weren't even checking our tickets. Look, here's my whole ticket. I've got my whole ticket. So I look and I went, I know that kid. Yeah. And it was the lad. So next time I saw him on the street, I went, hey, lad, were you at Hillsborough? And he went, yeah. And I said, I saw you on a video. And then he was. And then he said he was with 2 people who died. So I made friends with him and that. And I went, look, you need to go and see a solicitor, etc. And I did link him up with people. I don't know what happened to. Oh, yes. Once I saw him, and he was at this was after this. I then saw him, and it was at Liverpool Airport, and he was getting a flight somewhere. And I was like, yes. And he said, I listened to you, blah blah blah. Amazing. Then I saw him on the streets again afterwards. But that was just chance that I recognised him.
It is.
So,
thanks so much for everything, Sheila. Talking so openly and honestly for what is still very raw for so many people. One of the final things, and we always kind of bring our guests around this when we're looking for a bit of advice, really. Yeah. So the final sort of like question we'll have is, if any men are listening who have been through any significant traumas, what kind of advice would you give them going forward?
I would say that, in terms of trauma, the sooner you get help, the better. And it's really, when Grenfell happened, a few of us went down and met with survivors. And we were saying to them that they were focused on getting the right solicitor. And I said, forget about the solicitor. It's market forces. They'll still be on the high street next month. What I would say to you was push on your rehousing and get psychological therapies in place right away, because the sooner you treat it, the better. And that's what didn't happen after Hillsborough. And so many of young people now, they're middle-aged, and it's never too late to get help. I know that, we will still support people who ask for support, and we will direct them. I do know that there's, I'm not involved in it, but there's the Hillsborough Survivors support group or something, and I know they help. But we kind of built up a rapport with people who specialised around post-traumatic stress, and we will still help. We don't have a premises anymore, it was knocked down, but people can always get in touch via me, or if they ring the number on our website, which still comes up. It's Hillsborough Justice Campaign, contrast.org. And just briefly to say why it's contrast.org was because we were taken to court and threatened with imprisonment, sadly by the Hillsborough Family Support Group, for wanting to publish, to launch our website. And we were told we couldn't use the name Hillsborough, it was intellectual property, all the rest of it. Anyway, that was one of the saddest things, a day before an anniversary, seeing some Hillsborough families that side, some Hillsborough families, and I was sitting with Hillsborough families, and we were named as, don't comply, you're getting sent down in Leeds High Court. Anyway, so what we did was we put our website down. We were going to challenge it. Some of the families said, no, let them take us to court. And I said, the most important thing is getting the information out. So we went to a radical group of people that some of us knew in the Netherlands, and they hosted controversial websites, and if anyone went for them, they were prepared to take them on, and amongst them there were lawyers, etc. No one ever took us on, and it's still there now. So that's still there, and it hasn't been updated or anything, but it does give people the background to a lot of things. But I would say look, and I'd also say look to other people. I mean, before this began, we mentioned Tony Caveney and his walking group. If anyone feels they want to do things like that, contact Tony Caveney at the Florrie, or contact, other people who do things like that. Getting out in the open, and just things come naturally sometimes. But there is also, I think, the need for professional help for people who are traumatised. Don't underestimate how traumatised you might be, and the knock-on effect. You owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your family. So I'd say seek help,
Amazing. That's such incredible advice. So, we've had this in the past where we've said, there's people out there, go and speak to people. As Sheila said, go and see the professionals, but also see the value in your local community groups as well. Your walking groups, fishing groups, football groups. We've had them all on the podcast over the last few months, and they are so valuable. It's about finding people who've gone through what you've gone through. It can be one of the most powerful things. But once again, Sheila, thank you so much for coming on. You've been our first female guest as well, which is it's an absolute...
I'm really honoured. That's an award I'll happily take.
Put it on your CV. Yeah, the first female guest on the Man Hub.
I'm really
That's been
flattered.
a bit of a boys' club, hasn't it, Ian, really? But,
I'm really flattered at that, yeah. But I have been mentally thinking of other women I might suggest.
Oh, excellent. Please do. Yeah, we are open, yeah. But once again, thank you so much,
You're
Sheila.
very welcome.
Cheers, thank you.
Oh.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
All right, then, this is that part of the podcast where all the group get together. You're probably thinking, why is Dean not introducing? And it's this smooth, buttery, toasted voice from Ireland here, Conleth talking. We're just saying, because we've had a very big session from Sheila, which has been unbelievable. We can't cut any of it out. And we've already recorded our next guest, and it's just been, there's a lot. It's been a very heavy afternoon. So what we're actually just saying is that our little section is actually being cut, and I think the fellas are actually pretty jealous because Sheila actually says I was the eye candy of the group, and we actually have a recording of that, but they are denying it. So please, for the next session, with the next person coming up from the Journeymen, listen to us, and please give us feedback on the podcast. You know where we are. Get us on Twitter, get us on Spotify if you're listening to this. Okay, so keep on giving the man hug.
Okay, it's this part of the Man Hug where we shine a spotlight on a local organisation or charity who are there for you based on the theme of the podcast. Today we'll be focusing on an organisation who we've been wanting to get onto the podcast for quite a while, so we're really thrilled. And they're called Journeymen, and it's an organisation based in Birkenhead who offer men's support and a social calendar of events. And we're very happy to be joined by their CEO, Phil Roberts. So welcome, Phil.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, everyone. Thank you.
So tell us how Journeymen came about. How was it created?
My previous job, I was in Merseyside Police. And then it was at one point we had a lot of suicides on the Wirral. And it was just horrible to see them coming through near enough on a daily basis. Wow. And when I looked at the stats, a lot was men as well. And I just thought, you know what, it's just awful because it's just enough every other day it's happening. So I looked at the stats. I didn't know anything about mental health or anything like that. So I was in the family unit at the Solar campus and I was working alongside the Wirral Borough Council as well. So literally, I thought, let's see what I can do. So I commissioned a report and that went in. So they gave me time to actually look at doing something. So when I looked at the stats of the men and what Merseyside Police were doing, we were taking them to the likes of Arrow Park or Clatterbridge, and then they were coming out and then they were harming themselves, killing themselves, which was really sad. So what I thought is, let's have a look of what it is. So literally I sat down at a computer in one of the police stations and just typed in men's mental health Wirral, and I found one hub that I've been driving past for years or walking past or whatever. So I introduced myself and I had this concept of let's support the men off the Wirral. On the Wirral, we've got Tomorrow's Women, which is a wonderful organisation. But at the time, there was no Tomorrow's Men. So when I was going round to these men's houses saying, tell me what's wrong. All what they were saying was, I'm really depressed. I can't see me kids. Or I've got drinking, drug issues and all that. And the only thing I had in my toolbox was, have you been to see your doctor? And literally all of them had. And they said, the only thing what they're going to do is give me a load of tablets. And when I'm sad and lonely on a Saturday night, I'm going to take them. And we did have quite a few suicides as a result of that as well. So literally I introduced myself to one hub. I had this idea in my head, let's support the men off the Wirral like the women are. And I went to one hub. They said, okay, we'll sign up to this concept and you need to talk to this other hub. So I introduced to, so my little circle was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So much so, I called a meeting, and on the first meeting, we had some great organisations. We had Spider and all that from Wirral, and it was great. Bit of a buzz, and then I just sold the idea of let's support the men. So on the back of that, I got emails and text messages, and this was all pre-COVID as well. So the next meeting I called, we had even more people there. We had some good organisations, guest speakers, and then on the last one, I had to put the biggest meeting room I could get at the time was at Bedminster Civic Centre. Excuse me, just let me sort that. And it was about 70 organisations there. It was a big buzz, and I thought, this is great. So literally then I was doing a lot of work in my own time and all that, and then I thought, you know what, to take this to the next level, I could do this as a job, but I've never been self-employed. As I was in the police, you get conditioned, you get told where to go, what to wear, what to do, you get your pension paid and all that. And to go self-employed at my age, it was a bit scary. So I spoke to one of my mates, who was one of my directors, and he said, give it a go. And I went to Wirral Chamber of Commerce, and the thing, when I walked in and told them the idea, I was a bit sheepish about the idea. And the fellow from the chamber said, if you've got to do this. And he said, I needed this help 12 months ago, and I really struggled. You've got to do this. And the more people I spoke to, they would go, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. I've suffered because of this, and the other. So I took I registered with Company's House, which is scary, and then you start getting brown envelopes through the door every other day and all that. And then I left the police. I pressed the button, left the police, set everything up, did the business plan, had my head firmly in the ground. COVID was never going to happen. And we had one of the other CICs gave me the office space. He said, if you do this, you can have this office and it was Emma from Neo, I'll give her a mention. And everything was all set up. I had a directors meeting on a Friday, and we went into Gallagher's pub. And I said, come on, let's go and have a pint. We've worked hard. Walked in as Boris Johnson was closing the country down on the Monday. Right. So my business plan went out the window because everything I wanted to do was face to face. Let's get them in, let's get them talking, let's get them out and about. So on the back of that, we had to change. I've never heard of Zoom or Teams. I had to buy computers to talk to people, and all this was quite alien. But you know what? We went on the likes of Radio Merseyside. We did some press and local media and stuff like this. And next thing, where the country got closed down all of a sudden, and you couldn't access your GP, or you were getting told you can't go out and all that. Our phone started ringing, and there was men suffering pre-COVID, worried about COVID, worried about other things. And that's how it started. And, our 4th anniversary is coming up on the 7th of April. And 4 years, it's just absolutely flown by.
Out of dark clouds,
it's absolutely incredible.
Beautiful.
I think one of the things that sprung out there, and probably some of my co-hosts will say the same as well. One of the first guests we had on the podcast was Jake Mills, who had a terrible experience when he tried to end his own life with police in particular. What was the phrase he said? Don't do it. You're not going to do it again, are you? Or something. They dropped him off. And he was like, oh God, it'd be great if they had certain education and knowledge, but empathy as well. But then to see that, you've noticed the pattern of suicide within your area, and then you've actively wanted to go out and do something with it. It's absolutely incredible,
It's, you know what, it needs to be done, and if it wasn't going to be me, I was hoping that was going to be somebody else, but I thought, you know what, somebody's got to do it. Draw that line in the sand and just say, let's try and tackle this. Men have been suffering for years, and the old adage is men don't talk. But what do we do? We're sitting around the table here talking. As soon as you scratch under that surface and they get your trust and, and understanding, they open up, and you've just got to be mindful of us men bottle everything up. Be like a bottle of pop. As soon as you shake it, you take the top off, bang, it goes.
And I think one of the things is strategies as well, isn't it, to get men to talk? A lot of the organisations we've had on the podcast, will do things like fishing or football or walking groups or allotments or whatever it is. And it's that setting rather than a clinical, one-on-one with a psychologist where men might not want to talk. Whereas, if it is a certain group or something like a walking group, they might pal up with someone who's experienced what they have, and they will have more of a level of empathy and understanding. Is that what you're finding at Journeymen?
But that's it. We are commissioned by CWP, the NHS and all, so that's the clinical side. But when they come to us, as you say, it's non-clinical. On my wall in my consultation room, I've got the words. I was trying to be all clever and come up with some nice words or quotes, and on my wall I've got the words, stuff you never walk alone. Why aren't somebody Evertonians? But I always say, just read the words, and you get through the storm and all this. And it's great. So you go in there, you've got the Beatles posters, you've got the men's paintings and all that, and it's nice, it's warm. You can get a brew, and what we want to do is just where I am on the Wirral as well. We've got a minibus, so we just don't want the men just come into an office. We want to do loads in the community. So we do the fishing, we do the football. We've got 3 allotments. Like yesterday, we've got this massive polytunnel, which is far too big. But, but the men were at the wheelbarrows putting the hardcore down. But at the time, they're all talking, having a laugh. They're talking about the football, the weather. Oh, you're all right. And it's that buddying up as well. And it's just that report. And you know what? It's so powerful to see, but it's so lovely to see as well.
Yeah, it's that recurring theme, isn't it?
Yeah,
so the walking groups, the fishing groups,
it's simple.
The gardening groups, everything. It's about giving men that opportunity to have that sense of togetherness, that sense of community where they can relax and just open up, as opposed to it being very clinical or being very.
I think as well, just removing someone from their 4 walls. There's so many men I've met over the years in a sort of maybe a clinical setting where if they didn't have a football group on a Friday, they would literally be in 7 days a week. So it's then encouraging them then to try other things so that they're breaking that up. It's so valuable and important, isn't it?
It is.
So in terms of if I was someone that wanted to access Journeymen, what would be the route that I'd have to go through?
The easiest one is go on the website, see exactly what we do. Everything's listed on there, so have a look at the events. Add us on social media. I know that's everyone's fed up with social media and all that, but we put our what's on, what we do. So, and our referral form is on there as well. So all you've got to do is just click the referral form. And it's not War and Peace. It's just the basic details. I'll get you in. We have a one-to-one. See where you fit in and where we fit in with you as well. Starts off small. If it is just turning up to a walking group, and also one thing I've done from day one as well is instead of if somebody is struggling, instead of them speaking to different people and they've got to relay the information so many times to different people, they just stay with the one key worker right from day one. So they get to know them, they get to know the issues, they get to know the kids, then you get to know them properly. And it's so simple, but it works. And they then sit down and go, okay, well, you just do them, say, the walking on a Wednesday. Well, we're doing art on a Friday. Do you want to come to that? Or we're going to Tranmere Rovers on Saturday. Do you want to go to Tranmere with us?
Yeah.
Simple. But what we want to do is just not tell the men, this is what you're going to do. For them to phone us, we want to empower the men to actually just say, I can do this. And we've had men come all the way through, finish the journey with us, and then start as volunteering. And now I've got them. I've got one lad called Des. He started off as a man, still is a man, right? But started off, finished his journey, volunteers. Now he's full time with us. He's our fishing coach. I've got fishing qualifications for him. So he's out and about in the community doing fishing. Therapy.
That's brilliant.
Do you have kind of like end goals, what you'd love for most men that come through the service?
Yeah, you know what? With us, we've had men from day one who are still with us now. And we've had men where they've said, no, I want to do this for 6 months and then I'm going to get a job or I'm going to do this or, my relationship's going to get better. And they can finish at any time that they want. So if they finish after 3 months, but if they want to come back say a month later, all what they've got to do is pick up the phone, give me a ring, we'll get them in, have another one-to-one, see what's changed, press the button, and they're live on the system again. So you haven't got to reapply or go via a GP or anything. It's simple. In my head, everything's got to be simple.
Yeah, I love that, and it's about those achievable goals as well, isn't it? You know, setting men to achievable tiny steps. You know, because for a while it might be that they've took a while to even get out of the front door. You know, so it can be a very daunting thing. We've had some amazing charities and organisations from the Wirral on the podcast already. We mentioned Spider Project before. You know, we love Mel. We've had Mel on. Next month we've got the guys from the Paul Lavelle Foundation who are fab as well. Absolutely. How important is it as a Wirral network to connect with each other and signpost and share this?
It's so good because a journeyman man, we're not just saying you've got to stay with us. We're saying, go to Paul Lavelle, go to Jess Gallier or anyone like that. You know what, we've got some wonderful, and it's not just on the Wirral, we're linking into Liverpool, to Chester, to Ellesmere Port as well. So there's loads of help and support out there. So let's access it. Sometimes you can have too much help thrown at you, and it's just having that conversation. Would you want to go to this place? Would you want to go here? And get them to feedback as well.
Why do you think it works then? You know, looking back on this model, it seems to, people are flourishing and then they're doing so well. Why do you think it's so productive?
You know what? This is the way. I've struggled with my mental health in the past, and if this was about when I was really struggling or hurting, it would have worked for me. And it's just the old adage, if this is the way I would want me or my family to be dealt with. And it's a simple model, but it's so effective. And it's not just men. We include the families, because each man, they've either got a kid, a wife, a husband, a boyfriend, whatever. We always ask about them. And if there's any events, family events, we get them to come along and all that, include everyone in as well.
Amazing, that's incredible. So how do people find out more then? What's you mentioned the social media, but is there websites?
And you know what, we're out in the community all the time. If you see us in Birkenhead Park or a fishing event, or come over and say hello, introduce yourself. If there's anyone who, especially any funders out there who want to fund us or anything like that, because everything that comes down to pounds, shillings and pence to turn the lights on these days, it's expensive. But if there's anyone out there who wants to help, great, get involved that way. If anybody who wants to refer the husband in or the son, come and speak to us. It's as simple as that. Picking up the phone, click of a mouse. It's as simple as that. As I say, everything in my head is simple.
Do you reckon the website's probably one of the first port of calls for find out some information?
Yeah, and you can pick up the phone and phone the office as well in Birkenhead. We're open from 9 till 5 in the evening. Leave us a message, but have a look at the website. Everything's on there. See what you like. Get involved.
Brilliant. That's great. I know, from people I know who've been using Journeymen, just rave reviews. It sounds like such an amazing place to go, and I think we all need to go and have a little visit ourselves.
Yeah,
give us a visit. And you know
so
what?
We'll come along and we'll have a little day out as well.
Yeah, and what we have got as well, and if you want to come along on this, we've got the narrowboats as well. Right. So we've got access to
dream.
Oh no, we've got access to quite a few narrowboats now. So I've actually from April to October. So we've got 7 narrowboat events on one boat. And we're just Nigel from the Wirral YMCA has given us access to his boat. So what we do is self-crew. So what we want is, and if you want to join me on this, I can train you up as skippers or crew.
Can I have a hat?
Well.
Can I have a
hat? I've actually steered in Arrowboat before, don't you know?
I can steer, but I'll steer into the bank.
So my father used to live on one, so I've had a bit of
right. Well, that's it. And if you want to get involved that way and go out and that, and it's just great to get the fellas off the Wirral on one of these boats. We've got a boat over in Liverpool that goes from the new, I'm going to say a naughty word now, the Everton Stadium, but it's amazing. It goes through there, across the canal system, past the Liver building into the Albert Dock, and that's a great one as well. So we've got that, and we've got 2 other boats from the Wirral Canal Narrowboat Trust, and they're based in Cheshire as well. So we self-crew on some of them as well. But just to get the men on a boat, it's just great because we've had group stuff there. We've had floating counselling. We've had walking. You pull over onto the towpath and you just walk. So you're getting your steps up on your smartwatch. But you've got a group of men who are mixing her up, doing like about 5 hours on a narrowboat and an hour walking as well.
Well, we're always big advocates for ecotherapy here. We're always saying get out and just embrace the natural health service, you know. And I think you're the first person who's had one with narrowboats, and I absolutely love that. I think it's fantastic.
Well, come and join us, and you know what? It's great. We get some great feedback, some great social media. Pictures are wonderful, but it's just chugging along at 5, and you can walk the same speed as it, but it's just that chug. It's so, and also if somebody's struggling, we go to the front of the boat, which is so quiet, and all you hear is the birds tweeting, the water hitting the boat. You close the doors. If the doors are closed, that means somebody's having a one-to-one. And then you can just talk to them in a lovely environment.
Wow, that's incredible, amazing. We had Sheila Coleman as our first guest, as you know, and you yourself, Phil, was also at Hillsborough as well.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, you know, we've spoke about how men dealt with it differently, and Sheila gave us some classic examples of families that she'd worked with, and, you know, some men were very proactive and they were wanting to talk about it, other men just wanted to bury it and not deal with it, you know, directly and talk about the trauma that they witnessed and things. How yourself, how did you sort of like deal with it, you know, that traumatic event?
Well, Hillsborough started for me literally the year before. We were there against Forest, and we were on the same terrace and everything. And I was actually on the Leppens Lane in 88, and it was bedlam, and it was horrible. And I know you're thinking something was going to happen then, and we were lucky we got away with it then. So then in 89, when we got there, and I was staying in Sheffield that day, and I went up with my mate Ian, Dan, and his sister. And because his sister Maria was with us, we changed the tickets, and we were in stands, but my mate Dan was on the Leppens Lane. So it was a perfect day for football that day. It was nice and hot and sunny. And we went there, said ta-ra, and I was in the stands looking down. This is all before mobile phones and all that as well. So next thing, you know, the match started. And then it started happening in front of us. I was trying to look out for Dan. My eyesight isn't the best of what it is anyway. So all he had was a red Liverpool shirt on. And when it, after a while, you heard everything coming through and you stopped the game. And then when I seen bodies getting passed over, I said to Ian, look after your sister, and I jumped down and got onto the pitch. And when my mate Dan, he's a big lad, and literally I couldn't find him anywhere, and you know, people getting passed over. It was just horrible to see, and they were using the hoardings for you know, transporting people and all that. So I couldn't find my mate, and as I say, I couldn't phone him, I couldn't do anything. I felt helpless, and it was just carnage. It was hell on earth. So I couldn't. I always remember thinking all this carnage, and in my head, I couldn't hear anything. It was quiet, and now and then it was like in slow motion. And I thought, what do I do? So next thing, and this was the horrible thing, and stayed with me all the time. When they were passing people over, and unfortunately they died, they pulled the shirts over the heads. And literally, I was going down this row, and I was thinking, that's the same shape as Dan. And literally what I was having to do was taking the shirt off this poor man's face and looking at him, and it was horrible because I felt so guilty because it wasn't my mate Dan, it was somebody else. But I was thinking, thank God it's not Dan. But then I was saying, oh my God, I'm saying, thank God this poor man has died when he was alive an hour ago. So I did that so many times. Everyone was wearing Liverpool shirts. And literally, I found him. He was in shock. He was right behind the goal. Don't know how I missed him, but my head had gone on the day, and he was in shock. And all I could do was hug him, see if he was all right. And that night, we were staying in student accommodation, so literally we were all in shock. But it was weird because I'm a twin, and I'm staunch Liverpoolian, our Graham's staunch Evertonian, but he was at the other semi-final as well. So my mum, I'm from Wavertree. My mum was in Lennon's at the time in Wavertree, and she met one of her mates, and this was before, as I say, mobile phones and internet and all this. And my mum bumped into her mate, and she said, "Your twins are at the semi-final, aren't they?" And he went, "Oh yeah." She didn't know anything, and she went, "Something's happened, and people are dying," because it was all landlines. I couldn't get through to Liverpool from Sheffield because all the lines are gridlock. So that took ages. But then the knock-on effect of that, at the time, my sister was in Ibiza. She was a Thompson rep. So you know what it's like when you go to Ibiza. It's like party central. So when they were getting off the plane, she said she sensed something was wrong because people got on the plane at Manchester knowing that something's happened at Hillsborough. When they got off, they were all subdued and really quiet. And my sister said, "What's happened? Why are you all fed up?" They thought something happened on the flight. And he said, "No, there's people that died at a football ground." And he said, "Where is it?" And he said, "Hillsborough." And she knew I was there. So she was panicking. And if I can't get through to Sheffield, I can't get through to Ibiza. So at the time, like my mum and then all my Evertonian mates, they were worried. Oh, Graham couldn't get hold of me. So it was by the time I got through and said that we were all safe, it must have been about 8 o'clock at night. So, even that it was hard to get through. But we stayed in Sheffield that night, and it was just a weird, I don't know, we couldn't do anything. We couldn't say, let's go out for a meal, because we couldn't eat. We couldn't go to a pub. We didn't want to drink. It was just weird. The next day, we got up, and it was like a mirror of the day before. It was nice and sunny. So what we did, we went back to the ground, and you could see the press were there, and the police and the ambulance. You could see everything. It looked like a war zone, to be honest. So what we did, we picked daffodils, all of us, and we just laid them at the Leppins Lane. And then we come home, and then I went to it was at the Catholic Cathedral. We went to there, and there was just fellas who had just come from Sheffield. They still had the Liverpool shirts on, and they were all suffering. And, they had the wives or the kids hugging them. And then it's just, it was bad enough when it was like in single figures. And then when I started getting like to 10s to 20s to 30s, it was just, and then, it was having to deal with it at the time. It was 89, and I didn't know about counselling or whatever. So, I just dealt with like what fellas do, talk to each other, but you don't talk that much. And like for me and Dan, we didn't really talk about it, only because it really hurt. So much so, like, our parents actually sent us to Ibiza to my sister. And that was the only time.
Ibiza therapy.
Oh, God. Yeah, the forgotten 2 weeks that was. But I always remember me mate Dan, he went missing one day, and I found him on the roof of the hotel. And I searched everywhere, and you just know there was something wrong. And he was just crying. And literally, all he kept saying was, why? I didn't have any answers. He didn't. And at the time, there was, it was all rumours going on. It was all horrible stuff going on and all that. And it was just having to deal with it on a day-by-day basis. And then before you know it, it was like the first anniversary and then the second anniversary. And the pain sort of didn't go away, but you were trying to bury it, not just because you wanted to forget it. It was hard to deal with sometimes. And each anniversary, we always, like, my mate Danny's in New Zealand now, so we always text and all that type of thing. But for when the services were at Anfield and all that, I always made sure that I went. My son, my 2 sons, I've taken them to the ground for the anniversary and all that. And I'm not one for tattoos now. All of a sudden, when I hit 40, I went a bit nuts. And so I've got, like, on this arm, I've got my Liverpool, I've got the Liver Bird, and I've got my Hillsborough one there, and I've got the Hillsborough one on the back of my neck. And it's just always with me. And it's just hard. Still hard, and you can see, so many years down the line, I still get upset about it. And it's always been hard. We always recognise the anniversaries and all that. I'm so glad that, what Sheila's been through is a lot worse than what I've been through. And for what the families have done, they've done amazing. And they've been supportive of us, and I know the club have been supportive, and Kenny's been amazing, and all that. It's, that's when you've got a proper, decent city looking after you, and we're not always the victims. Unfortunately, at the time, we were the victims, and it's taken this long for justice, and we're still fighting for it. And I was there on the day where, what's his name? From Manchester.
Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham. I apologise because I've got so much respect for him. For him, I was on the cop that day for when he stood up, and I was one of the ones who was booing him because at that time I didn't trust any politician at all. For him to come back a year later, that was so brave for him to do. And he's an Evertonian as well, isn't he? But I don't know. For him to do that was just, for him to kickstart everything, and for we're still fighting for full justice and all that. But for him to do that and kickstart it, if he was here, I'd shake his hand and give him a hug. For him to, that was a bit of help for me personally, knowing that someone actually did give a damn and stuck to the promise as well to what they were doing. So it's been a long time, but as I say, for what the families have been through, it's just awful.
Well, it's the families, but it is people like yourself as well who've survived, and I've got so many family and friends and colleagues and people who again survived, and it's, as you say, there was no sort of like real counselling. There was no kind of like.
There wasn't.
I mean, Sheila mentioned about a support group that was based in Stanley Park and stuff, but there was thousands of people there, wasn't there? Dotted all around the country as well and stuff. So how men dealt with it, it's there wasn't really the talking about it and the processing it, which is the things you just spoke about there would traumatise anyone, and if you think about what would happen today if someone experienced that, such as like the Manchester bombing, straight away there was like counselling and talking therapies just offered to everyone and things. you think like putting your energy into like, you know, the mental health groups where you're helping others, is that reward to yourself, would you think?
It is. And I've always said this is the way you know, back in 89, I would have loved a Journeymen or Paul Lavelle or someone like that to be there, because I would have gone along and introduced myself, and it would have been a bit weird for me to begin with, but it's weird for anyone to go to an organisation and just say, look, I need a little bit of help here. And I've always said, you know, mental health and physical health go hand in hand. If you break your leg, you don't say, I'm not going to hospital. And your brain, if that goes, you need to go somewhere to get fixed, or, you know, get it tweaked, or, you know, a little bit of time with somebody who understands, or you can talk and have that rapport. And it is, as I say, I like things simple. And to me, talking, that's the first step. And if you do need therapy or intervention or staying out in a hospital or some sort, it starts with that one conversation. So if there's anyone listening to this and you are struggling, talk. It could be to your mate in the pub, it could be to your mum, your dad, your doctor, your psychologist, someone in work, HR, whoever. Start at that conversation.
Amazing. That's our tagline, isn't it, really, on the podcast? You know, talk to someone. It doesn't matter who it is, anyone, but amazing advice. And just, you know, it's not easy to talk about things like this. We can't thank you enough. And hopefully, you know, if there's people listening who, again, have maybe been struggling and, you know, for many years who witnessed the same types of things, I think you'll give people a lot of inspiration that they can go out and find somewhere where they can go and talk, you know, and Journeyman's one of the places, isn't it? You know,
well, that's it. We're one of quite a few places now, so we are quite lucky that the horizons change, and there's people out there and organisations. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, from the NHS, private, you know, embedded within the community. There are places out there, and as I say, it's just as simple as just reaching out to one of them as well.
Well, thank you so much. Look, before you go, just one last plug. Give us your website for Journeymen so people can go and have a look.
You know what? As simple as just type in Journeymen Wirral.
Yeah.
We're on there. We're on Facebook, X. It's X now, isn't it? Apparently,
Twitter,
yeah. We're on Instagram, Threads, and all that. We're on everything. You can't get So add us. You can see exactly what we're doing. The what's on for the from the next week goes out over the weekend, so you can see exactly what we're doing. I left before, and the men were doing Dungeons and Dragons before.
Oh, wow.
And all that. So we've got art tomorrow, we've got Trammy Rovers Saturday, and then we go into a new week. So we come up with weird and wonderful. If the men come up with any ideas, I've got a minibus. We go into Wales, we go to Liverpool, we go bowling. You know, get involved. Put a smile on your face, but you're talking, and you know you can talk and put a smile on your face.
So there you
engage.
Go. Follow all of their social media. I follow it, and I love seeing how they progress and all of the things they're doing. I'm quite looking forward to seeing myself on it with a skipper's hat driving a narrowboat.
I've got skipper's hats. I've got them in the office, so you can be Captain Birdseye.
I'll be the cabin boy.
Once again, Phil, thank you so much for coming on to the Man Hug.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.
Please make sure that you follow us on Twitter. It's @TheManHug. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next month.